writing as an act of affirmation in the face of caste oppression. And though of course this oppression is leavened by other forms of oppression, that's essentially where we're going to look at. Now, our two writers, Bama and Shivakami, are not just leading Dalit women writers, but they also share something else. Both of them have had intimate experience with the two institutions that many of us commonly assume provide an avenue for change. Shivakami was in the IAS and worked in the government, and there is a common belief that government is the vehicle to bring about transformation and change. And Bama, those of you who are familiar with her autobiographical novel, correct to know that there is the engagement with the church, Catholic Church, and the realities of caste oppression within that, which then forces her to reassess what is it that she needs to do with her own life. So we have two writers who have experience of these two institutions and have, in a way, transcended the limitations of avenues that are normally put forward as avenues for change. And I think that, in a way, will bring a very unique perspective to what they've been writing about and how they see the role of writing and literature in bringing about healing and transformation. So the way that we're going to structure this session is that Bama will first speak for about 5 or 6 minutes about her own experiences and how she sees the act of writing. And then we will come to Shivakami, then Susie Tharu will give her perspective as a theorist. Then we will have a discussion here and open up the floor. So I'll hand things over to Bama.
Good afternoon. In the first session, we heard from the Muhammad Hanif session. It was said that wherever you go, the caste follows you. Even after death, it follows us. So in this society, we tend to look at the reality through the prism of high and low. And when we see people and when we segregate people by this attitude, then we inflict pain on one section of our society. And this pain, social exclusion, we experience, and when we try to write it down, what happens is even the scars become wounds again. It's not that easy to write the pain that we experience. The first stage of healing is when we actually express this pain. Though it is painful, there only the healing starts. So when the first stage is we accept it. Yes, there is pain. So the next stage is we analyze why this pain. What is the cause of this pain? So instead of pushing it under the carpet, we really find out why I alone, or my people alone, are pushed aside and we are marginalized. What is the reason? So the first stage is, even for myself, I felt that I am victimized. But the second stage, when I began to write, I realized that there is a need to come out of that victimhood and to become a militant. Militant to oppose all these oppressors that do not recognize me as a human person. Now this pain, everybody has pain actually. Only that is the pain of being human. As Buddha says, he says in Tamil, "Āsaye tunpathirku kāranam." We all have pain in living. Existence is a struggle. Real life is a struggle. But what I see is there is difference in this pain. So one is we hope for something but that cannot be achieved. So there is a pain. Unfulfilled dreams, there is a pain, okay. But the pain that I am mentioning is the pain of humiliation being under the power of someone. Who decides how human I can be? That is the pain I am talking about. Somebody else decides for me and tells me this much human you can be. That is, it is not only for Dalit. This determines the degree of one's humanity based on race, color, caste, language, gender. Everything is included here. So that pain is healed. When you write, there is a possibility of healing to a certain extent. So as I said, the second stage, when I realized that there is a need to protest against this, then I become the militant to protest against the system, and there is a need for it. And as I protest, then the healing starts, and the process of healing starts. And this protest can be taken in many forms. Maybe it can be explosive and violent, or it could be non-violent, a ridiculing, a breaking of social norms and taboos, a hilarious display of native wit, rustic humor, and common sense when faced with tricky situations. So these forms of protest is in the culture of Dalits. The culture of Dalits is a protesting culture. At the same time, it is a life-giving, affirming culture, I would say. So that's why people, though they experience a lot of segregation and pain, they really live because of this culture. Because this culture gives them life. They decide for themselves, and they pick up courage from this culture to protest the oppressive system. So all these instead of breaking down, we break through the system, and that helps us to heal. And our writing, the matrix of our writing, I would say, is first of all the pain and the reason for it, and our protest or democratic ripple to establish a more human and a society where everybody is the same. I am second to none. So that kind of feeling, that psychological affirmation, that enables me to own up my own identity and to stand on my own foot and speak for my people.
I'm glad I'm coming third because I have so much to respond to these two very rich presentations that have come up. And I want to point out first that actually there is too far away. I want to point out first that there is something else in common between the three of us who are on this podium now, and that is we're all three women. I like to think that we're feminists, and I know from the writing of both Bama and Sivakami that they would lay claim to this, and for the time being I'm happy to take in good faith that Siddharth Varadarajan is also entitled to that label. What is it that made such a difference in the world of literature when women and Dalits began to write for themselves? And I think I can just begin to point to the larger problematic here by saying there is an interesting distinction I came across when I was doing some work on medicine, and a distinction between healing and cure. Now, cure happens when a doctor decides that you're okay. But healing is something that happens to the individual sick person, and that is in some senses outside the scope of what medicine can do. Healing happens in another terrain. It's not in the terrain of cure. So when you look at what women have contributed to literature or what Dalits have contributed to literature, you'll see there's this sharp transformation that takes place between cure and healing. For the last 200 years maybe, we've been engaged in a social reform movement that has had the reform of women or the emancipation of women at its heart. And for about the same time, we've been engaged in a movement that has had the abolition of untouchability. We all grew up with these little inland letter cards which said untouchability is a crime. Right? So there was a state, a government, a public investment in curing the oppression of women or curing the oppressions that caste systems lay out. And there were paradigms that were set out on how we can cure it. The state had proposals, you did this, you did that, and so on. But there's a sharp shift that comes in when Dalits began writing about what is wrong with Indian society. Right? Dalits are not writing about only themselves. Dalit is writing about India and about Indian society. And when Dalits write about Indian society or about the world, then that writing is something that happens in this terrain of healing as against the terrain of cure. So what I'm trying to say is that earlier on there were non-Dalit proposals about what could be the cure for the condition of untouchables, of the experience of being untouchable and so on. And the shift from healing, a cure to healing takes place when women begin writing about the women's experience, and Dalits begin writing about Dalits' experience, and this is a massive paradigm shift, something that opens the field up in a totally new way. So if we look at the work of Bama and Shivagami, and both of them really didn't speak much about their own work, you see that Bama writes entirely about her personal experience or about the experience of her village. I don't know what this new novel that you're writing about is, but I presume it's not going to move into a totally different style and mode of writing. And this bringing of that experience into the public sphere, into public knowledge, is a revolution. It's something that completely breaks with the paradigm of cure and shifts it into what one might think about as a paradigm of healing. And I can speak about my own experience as well, my experience as speaking as a woman, of what, say, the women's movement or the feminist movement did for us. We all knew we were equal, that men and women were equal, but for some reason we never felt that way, right? We never saw it happening in that way. But when the women's movement comes into focus, we begin to be able to see what this world looks like from a woman's point of view, and a new set of terms, a new concepts, new images, new narratives come in that open up this other terrain, which is the world as seen from a woman's point of view. For me, if it was a healing, I could describe it something like this. I always used to think before I encountered feminism that something was wrong with me. Why did I feel so confused, so much in pieces, so incoherent as it were? And I thought, maybe I should try harder. I should try harder to become a good human being, a fully focused and integrated human being. And then I discovered with feminism that being not integrated, being in pieces, was a very productive condition. That was a condition from which I had to work, and that the energy that I was going to derive was precisely because, as Bama said, you look back at this conditions that you are in without the answers that are being provided to you by the state or by reformists or by well-wishers of various kinds, and you respond to this condition from that state of non-resolution or confusion or incoherence or whatever it is. And that incoherence is precisely what society as a whole needs in order to heal itself.